Before anyone says anything, yes, I'm staying indoors as much as possible. I wear gloves when I pump gas. I wash my hands very regularly, even more so nowadays. And yes, I encourage you to do the same as we try to hunk our way through this corona calamity. My topic for today's video is in regards to the whole debate that just occurred a couple of weeks ago in light of the surprising success of the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, and how people are butting heads from both sides regarding whether or not the creators and execs should listen to fans. I just know this is going to be a hot button topic right from the get-go. Now, I've already made a video that's about a year old now where I talk about veering away from fandom toxicity, but I was inspired to return to the topic after coming across this video from 3 Buck Theater titled Sonic Grossed $65 million because it listened to fans. I haven't watched enough of 3 Buck Theater's content to draw my own conclusions as to whether I think he's a good YouTuber or not. All I really can say after watching this video is that even if I was subscribed to his channel, I think this video alone would have swayed me to unsubscribe from him for 2 big reasons. One is that he said this.
But in my universe, that seems like the proper call. That seems like the proper course of action would be to go and listen to what the fans are saying. But people here, I don't know who wrote this article here, but they're saying the redesign of the new Sonic in response to fan backlash shows how people power is now shaping pop culture. But what does it mean for creativity? Asks Stephen Kelly. Okay, Stephen Kelly. I'm not gonna. The whole article is it's insanely long.
The fact that he pulled up this article announced that he couldn't be bothered to read it the whole way through, or just barely specified parts that he did read, indicated to me that he only glanced at the surface and afterward decided to make a video declaring that the article has the wrong mindset, should have set off some red flags. And there's also the factor that all his arguments basically boiled down to, oh, just look at that early design. Any person with half a brain cell could tell you that that's an objectively awful look for Sonic. We were right to beg for it to be redesigned. Even if that early Sonic design does go down in history as a textbook example of horrible design for a cartoon character translated into live action, and even if the redesign was something that fans got excited for and gave them hope that the movie could at least be passable, both as a Sonic film and as a film in general, that's not a very strong argument to make your point on. It can fall into multiple categories of fallacious appeals, and there are 2 off the top of my head that I can say for sure it does. Appeal to popular opinion and appeal to emotion. Now, I will fully and unironically admit that I am in the vast majority of the ballpark who thinks that the redesign for Sonic was the best route to go in this instance, and Jeff Fowler was grateful for the feedback, so I respect him for his mature interaction with the audience as well as his willingness to take them seriously. And I'm further grateful that it wasn't at the expense of the well-being of the crew doing these last-minute time crunch changes. The VFX studio shutting down afterwards really had a lot more to do with other factors than just redoing the design at the last minute with a slight delay for the film's release. But did Sonic get this successful solely because of the redesign? That's a hard call if I'm being completely honest. I mean, I'm sure there's at least one person out there who finds the redesign to be just a whole other valley of uncanny, or how much better would it really do if it had the current updated design with a lackluster script? Honestly, I do think that both designs, in their own way, ended up being a key factor in playing up the hype for the movie, the older design being an easy bait for internet memes, and the new one not only getting such positive feedback from fans, but also potentially intriguing non-fans. And nowadays, at least, hype seems to be the biggest factor more than anything else to a film's success at the box office. The movie is made mainly for fans, but aside from that, it serves as a nice little popcorn flick for the family to enjoy, as well as a nice stepping stone to a future where video game adapted movies can actually prove to be more successful than previously thought. Back to the main topic. Unlike 3 Buck Theater, I actually went and pulled up that article that he refused to read the whole way through. It's an article that talks about the topic, and it admittedly does talk about what you'd expect. How this whole creator-consumer relationship has always existed, sometimes not in a healthy way, and how the modern age of social media has amplified the voices of the consumers. The article also goes on to bring up such classic recent examples, like how that nonsensical petition to remake the Game of Thrones season finale went unexpectedly viral, or how the backlash against The Last Jedi ultimately fed into the result of The Rise of Skywalker being a very lackluster fix-it fic. But the article does bring up a few quotes that intrigue me, which I will be going back to talk about later. Now, fans do have the right to have high expectations for what they go see, don't get me wrong. One of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to media is undermining audiences and thinking that they'll eat whatever pandering bullcrap is thrown at them. By the same account, though, I know that most artists and filmmakers don't go out of their way to make a bad product, and I realize that people aren't dumb just because they don't love or hate the same things that I do. But I can certainly say that instances of rage being taken to extreme cases of hostility have happened more often than they should. Ideally, they shouldn't happen at all, but you can never truly distinguish how far is too far until the aftermath. Case in point, for one of the most extreme examples in recent memories is the tweet of a mass shooting threat at Cal Arts that happened just a couple years ago, right after the release of the trailer for the Thundercats Roar reboot. Another example of fan toxicity in recent memory is regarding the Best Animated Feature category at this year's Oscars, particularly after Klaus's fanbase were enthralled with not just the nominations, but all the wins at the Golden Globes, and even more so when it was nominated Best Animated Feature. But then, when the win went to Toy Story 4, several fans of Klaus went online and relentlessly harassed Pixar over it. I mean, I can understand not being a fan of Toy Story 4 for a variety of reasons, but to me, this scenario implies that when people say award shows are rubbish and don't matter, it seems that they mean award shows don't matter unless they cater to my personal tastes. Don't get me wrong, I thought Klaus was technically innovative, and I'm all for being an influence on the direction of film, but the big thing that animation/Klaus fans really seem to be bent on, even if they might try to deny it, is to bring back hand-drawn. As much as I too like to see hand-drawn become a more regular part of mainstream movie-going entertainment, not dominant, just more regular, I do not condone advocating it by means of playing the victim card. You're going to tell me that giving fans what they want is going to give you success. Give them something good. Sometimes I just feel compelled to ask, will it? Will fans in general really be motivated to go and see what they feel respects them and caters to what they're looking for? Or will it only satisfy a select group of fans while others are alienated in the process? Are fans just being ungrateful little trolls, or are they being desperate? Referring to that BBC article for a minute, one line of text says, Henry Jenkins remains optimistic in the power of fandom and its power to bring us together as well as tear us apart. Some of these debates have certainly been up the larger part of partisan divides and culture wars of our times, he says, but again, this is only part of the story since fandoms also shared space for conservatives and liberals to come together around shared interests that are not automatically defined in partisan terms and talk through their hopes and fears for the future together. In this regard, fandom is not extreme, the current moment is extreme, and fandom is much as part of the solution as it is part of the problem. Now, if you've watched my videos for a while at this point, I think I've made it pretty clear about my opinions about how dangerous the voice of consumer culture can be nowadays in the world of industry, especially when you get comments on popular YouTube videos saying things like,
"Wow, this is absolutely not what I thought the movie was going to be about. Trippy. Not one I'd watch." The implication with that last quote being that CinemaSins spoiled the entire movie for the person, which robbed it of a potential sale while misrepresenting it.
Now, I know that some are going to be quick to say that fans should be entitled to express when they're not satisfied with something about media, seeing as they are the ones paying to go see it. And while that is true, let's also not forget about those paying to distribute said media, who also need to make a profit off the consumer's money, not just for themselves, but also for the creators of the media, and the means of making said media viewable to the general public. Now, I'm sure with the way I'm preaching all these moral values, I'm sure there might be one or two people out there who think that I can't possibly know the feeling of pain you get from being disappointed by this thing that you put so much expectations into, like any entry in the Star Wars canon, or from its creators tasked with bringing this new entry to your favorite property, only to utterly bastardize it beyond all belief. Also like an entry in the Star Wars canon. Surely I can't possibly understand what it means to be a hardcore fan. To both instances, I say that is completely false. I fully confess to having had plenty moments of frustrations that I had difficulty articulating about, regarding certain pieces of media, that have gradually manifested into spite. One of my YouTube friends, Mark Cabuzzi, made his own video series where he talks about his own hypothetical film adaptation of Resident Evil, as he was disappointed with the Paul Anderson movies. He made those videos as his own form of healthy catharsis and brain exercises. Going back to the article for a minute, I refer you to this text by Scott Mendelson. Is this fandom a problem, or is it simply a symptom of a larger disease? In my view, the relationship between these incidents and our current political moment is completely symbiotic. In retrospect, these incidents seems like a subcultural sign of things to come, but our culture war isn't a product of fandom. If anything, this moment in fan culture is evidence of how long these culture wars have been waged and how deeply they permeate our interactions with society, culture, and each other. While I'm certainly not here to side with Scott in saying that the Sonic movie would have done well anyways if it just dismissed the fans, and while I do believe that fans being glad with what they got did play a part in its success, what I will say is that, while I know that there are people who have brought up Scott's reasoning and justification here as utterly preposterous, this saying here did get me to think about how all these hardcore fans are being shaped as people outside their fan circles. If you can't be civil when talking about pieces of fictional media, then how will you behave when it comes to interacting with other facets of life? Fortunately, Sonic didn't try to push any agendas. It just gave a fun film and is fortunately another small example that good game-adapted movies are possible to make. And also fortunately, I haven't heard of any specific instances where Sonic fans, as a whole anyways, were lacking in civility when expressing their disdain for the original Sonic design. I am of the belief that these scenarios should be treated case by case, but there are still a few ground rules that can and should be established here, I think. On the one hand, I do believe that fans have a right to have an upfront say if they're not satisfied with what they're seeing in advance, and to advise changes to be made, provided the changes are doable on behalf of the artists without extolling them. I also believe that fans, and other casual viewers, of course, also have the right not to go see something they don't feel has much promise, or even ask for a refund on a ticket that they purchased to a movie they ended up being disappointed with. On the other hand, though, there are a few types of demands that I do not think fans should be entitled to make, or if they make them anyways, they should not be listened to. Yes, I'm sure I'm going to get some flack for saying that, but I don't care. I still stand firm that it needs to be said either way. For one, I don't think fans have the right to be entitled to a remake just because they petitioned for it. Because it's cruel to the people who put their best foot forward the first time around, even if others behind it did drop the ball. It breaks continuity in a series, which would mean no one would be able to get immersed in it, and it would deprive any writers or artists on board the opportunity to pick up the pieces left over from the mistakes made and make something better out of it. And moreover, since we are currently in a time when remaking properties for a quick buck is such a hot-button topic as is, think about what sort of consequences would arise out of a world where remaking something on a whim was the norm. It might tempt creators to put forth less effort the first time around so that they could get consumers to pay more for a second round, or even a third round, or who knows how many rounds. I don't know about you, but that sounds to me like the ultimate recipe for exploitation. If something deserves to be remade, it's typically best to wait a while for all the drama to clear before attempting it again. Let the ashes settle before a phoenix rises, so to speak. Another thing I firmly believe that fans should not be entitled to declare or petition is for any films currently in production or any show still running to get cancelled by their demand. I do not care how much justice you believe yourself to be bringing into the world as a result. I don't care how good you claim your intentions are. The road to ruin is paved with good intentions. Hence the aforementioned Thundercats Roar incident. For one, there are other fans greatly anticipating a movie or future episode, and would feel robbed after discovering that it got cancelled because of a mass online rage. And no matter how inconceivable or how far-fetched you feel the scenario where being able to gain anything out of something would be to someone, it's absolutely not your place to call those people idiots who don't know any better. That's a line you never cross, in spite of the appalling number of jerks online who do it with no qualms whatsoever. For another, it's cruel to the artists and technicians working on the projects who are giving up their all just to make a living and pursue a career. If a project gets shut down, then they're out of a job and may have trouble finding work elsewhere in their industry. Even if we believe that the end result of a product is something they wouldn't put on their resumes if they're smart, what matters most in getting further work is the ability to prove oneself a hard, dedicated, and resourceful worker, committing to do whatever project they've been given. Believe it or not, there was a time, not too far back, where I would have been in the same camp of hoping that movies or shows that sounded terrible end up getting cancelled, and would say that the end result of it completely justified my attitude. The Emoji Movie being one example. The final product certainly showed that just because the Lego Movie turned out to be an unexpected gem, doesn't mean you can capture lightning in a bottle twice, as is also showcased with other Lego Movie ripoffs. But the truth is, even if something sounds terrible by its inception, you typically can't tell when you've made a mistake in art until it's already made. After all, for every film that turned out to be a total debacle, as was predicted by the masses, there is at least one other that completely shattered everyone else's expectations, and in some cases even revolutionized the whole art medium and set a few courses. Film is an experimental art, after all, and I think a lot of people would find robbing someone of the right to experiment as an artist just as callousing and disparaging as taking away someone's freedom of speech. Yes, freedom of speech does come with the responsibility to be held accountable for what one says, just as whoever is in charge of bringing a project to life is also accountable for its shortcomings and the suffering of those who signed up to help or her bring it to life. But that leads to another reason why one should not try to go out of their way to cancel a movie or show just because they're desperate to not see it come into fruition. Sometimes, seeing how far you've fallen can create an amazing contrast with how far you can rise up to. Like how Sony was able to rise up with Spider-Verse, or even go back to Star Wars for a minute. While you do have The Last Jedi with its divided reception and Rise of Skywalker with its very disappointed reception, there's still The Mandalorian on Disney+, which has been getting some largely good reception. I still stand by that the existence of bad, lackluster products, or trends for that matter, don't mean that good products don't stop existing as a result. Even if the fear of regular standards for quality being lowered is prominent, and understandably so, being a bunch of little so-and-sos isn't the answer. If anything, that is the bigger enemy to the business, as it leads to products that no one will be satisfied with because everyone only had their own interests at mind, and that applies to all venues. For creators who are willing to stick to their guns and try to prove that they can make something audiences would never have known they wanted to see, I'm willing to support them and give them a chance to prove themselves, provided they don't use position as an excuse to be arrogant or declare themselves above any input. Likewise, I'm open to hear audiences' responses and be open-minded to the validity of their points, if it means anything can be brought out better in the final result. But only to the extent that audiences aren't just using their position to be entitled and demanding and oblivious to the needs of others. A healthy relationship between the two is key to both, and if the quality of the final product is less than desired, then hey, let's put less effort into pointing fingers and throwing stones and more into trying to do better next time. Thank you very much for consuming this video, and as always, if you have any more input, I would love to hear it.